I was 15 when my uncle handed me the old apron, threadbare linen, no name stitched on the front, just a pocket for loose coins that clinked like pity. He'd pat my shoulder when I bent to wipe spilled soup, his hand landing heavy, leaving a shadow of grease or dust on the thin cotton. "Be useful, girl," he'd say, pointing with his chin at the crumbs under the chairs, the stains on the glass table where his friends stubbed out cheap cigarettes. My mother whispered it like a blessing, "Family shelters family. He feeds us, gives you a roof. Be grateful." So I was, in the way a locked window is grateful for the wind it can't touch. I scrubbed his floors while they laughed over beer bottles, my knees cold on the cracked linoleum. Sometimes they dropped coins by accident or on purpose. "For sweets," he'd say, smirking, watching me stoop to snatch that tiny mercy off the dirty tiles. At night, when the house settled into snores and half-drunk curses through thin walls, I sat on my narrow cot and traced my finger along the seam of that apron. It smelled of bleach and burnt oil. It smelled like the truth they wanted me to swallow. You belong here. On your knees. Useful. Quiet. That night, the first night, I slipped a small notebook under my thin pillow. The pages were blank and smelled of cheap glue and hope. I didn't know yet what I'd write inside it, only that it would hold my tally. A private ledger of every slight, every coin, every time he reminded me who he thought I was. In that dark, I made myself a promise I never spoke aloud. One day, he would see my name not on an apron, but above every door he couldn't open without knocking first. The apron stayed on its hook by the back door, always waiting for my hands. My uncle's voice echoed down the hallway every morning. "Girl, sweep the porch. Girl, mop the kitchen." He never bothered to use my name. I don't think he remembered it when he talked to his drinking friends. To him, I was just hands, small, obedient, easy to keep busy. But my hands were not idle in the dark. By the faint blue light of my mother's old alarm clock, I flipped open that cheap notebook and started learning numbers no one taught me. The cost of bread, the price of soap. How much my uncle drank every Friday, how much he lost on games he never won. He let the house rot under peeling paint while he bragged about new shoes and bottles of brandy. I wrote it all down, his debts, his petty boasts, the gaps he never noticed widening under his feet. Sometimes, when he was out, I'd stand by the door of his study, a dusty room full of unopened letters and unpaid bills. I taught myself how ink dried when fear soaked through paper. I traced signatures I didn't yet know how to forge, but I learned their shapes all the same. By the time I turned 17, the notebook was thicker, crammed with numbers, debts, rumors I overheard while scrubbing behind his armchair. Each page felt like a coin slipped into my own hidden pocket. He never asked why I smiled when he told me to fetch another mop. He never looked at my hands and wondered what else they could hold besides a dirty rag. One night, I flipped to the very first page and wrote a single word at the top. Ode. I met him behind the bakery where the warm scent of bread spilled into the cold alley at dawn. He was sweeping flour off the back steps when I came to buy stale loaves for my uncle's breakfast, cheap bread for cheap men. He looked up, eyes kind, hands dusted white to the wrists. He asked if I wanted the ends for free. I said I'd pay. He didn't argue. He only wrapped the bread in yesterday's newsprint, folded the edges so nothing fell out. Every morning, he'd nod when he saw me coming, a nod that meant I see you. Not the apron. Not the dirt on my sleeves. You. Some days, he slipped me a warm roll from the back, the soft center, the piece they'd never sell but he knew I'd savor when no one watched. I learned his name last, like a secret I had to earn. He spoke softly, but his questions were sharp. Who makes you wear that? Why do your shoulders look so tired? I lied at first. Family duty. Family debt. He didn't press, only handed me extra crusts, a small mercy wrapped in rough paper. He once placed his hand on my wrist, just for a second, flour ghosting onto my skin, and said, "One day, you'll feed yourself first. Remember that." When my uncle barked at me from the front porch, this boy's quiet words stayed hidden in my pocket, warm as the bread I broke with my own hands when no one was watching. Winter pressed in early that year. Drafts slipped through the kitchen walls like whispers I couldn't silence. My uncle's voice boomed louder when the nights grew long. He liked to remind me the roof above my head was his gift. Don't forget, girl, without me, you'd be starving. He never guessed I already knew the taste of hunger and the sharper taste of wanting more. One evening, after scrubbing the same stain on the hallway rug for the third time, I found an envelope behind the coat rack. It wasn't hidden well, just wedged under last year's tax forms, soft with dust. Inside, a letter from the bank, words stamped in red that I read slowly, lips moving in the quiet. Overdue. Foreclosure. Final notice. My heart beat steady as I slid it back. I didn't panic. I didn't dream wild dreams of freedom. I only wrote the date and the numbers in my notebook, under the word owed. A week later, behind the bakery, I asked the boy, my boy now, though we never said so out loud, how loans worked. How deeds moved from one hand to another. How a promise written in ink could choke a man who thought he owned the world. He didn't laugh at my questions. Didn't pity me for not knowing. He told me where to look, who to listen to. He pressed a small book into my hands, not bread this time, but pages filled with laws and loopholes, margins crowded with notes in his careful hand. That night, I didn't write just numbers. I wrote names. I wrote a plan in the hush, floorboards creaking under my bare feet while my uncle snored his pride into the stale air. Some seeds grow only in darkness, watered by silence, fed by patience. I planted mine beneath his roof. And I waited. Spring came late, dragging its feet through the muddy yard behind my uncle's house. He drank more when the days grew longer, longer hours to boast, longer hours for debts to bloom like weeds he refused to see. I learned to step softly past him, to keep my eyes down, my apron clean, my pockets quiet. But behind my lowered lashes, I watched everything, which friends slipped him cash, which cousin left a business card on the hallway table when they thought I wasn't listening. They all thought they owned him, and by owning him, owned me too. One night, the boy from the bakery, my boy with flour still clinging to his cuffs, met me under the street lamp near the grocery store that reeked of spilled beer and old meat. He held out a single page, the ink smudged at the edges, but clear where it mattered, a lease. A tiny back room in the bakery's cellar, dry, warm enough, cheap enough that even my hidden coins could reach it. No one asked what I'd do with a room and no furniture. They didn't see the books I stacked on crates, the battered lamp I found in a neighbor's trash. By day, I poured soup into my uncle's bowl. By night, I copied numbers onto sheets I learned to sign myself. Deeds, debts, titles. I practiced his name, over and over until my pen moved like his hand might, lazy, careless, trusting the world to stay his. In that small cellar, my breath misted in the cold, but my hands stayed warm on the paper. I wrote the future in ink thick as blood. His house, his car, his pride. One quiet lease at a time, I slipped the world out from under his feet, the way he once slipped coins into my palm and called it charity. By midsummer, my uncle's porch sagged under its own tired wood. He barked about fixing it every morning, but the hammer never came out of the shed. He still didn't know that the house he bragged about keeping over my head was already half mine on paper, signed and sealed in an office he'd never stepped foot in. I carried the ledger everywhere now, tucked into my apron, folded under the stale bread he thought I fetched just to keep busy. In the cellar behind the bakery, I traced every borrowed coin back to its source. Who he owed. How much interest he forgot to pay. Who would come knocking first when the final warning turned into a heavy boot on the porch. I learned to make my voice sweet when his friends came to drink. More tea, uncle? More sugar, sir? While they laughed, I listened. I learned which one would trade secrets for small favors, which one hated him just enough to slip me a name, an address, a hint of where the real owners sat counting overdue debts. One night, I stood in the cellar with my boy, my soft-eyed, flour-dusted conspirator. He held my hands over the ledger and said, "Tell me you're ready." I didn't say yes. I only turned the last page and signed my name where his used to be. Outside, the world slept in its summer heat, doors cracked open for breeze, blinds half drawn. Inside, I inked out the last lie he told himself, that I would always be grateful for crumbs. By midsummer, my uncle's porch sagged under its own tired wood. He barked about fixing it every morning, but the hammer never came out of the shed. He still didn't know that the house he bragged about keeping over my head was already half mine on paper, signed and sealed in an office he'd never stepped foot in. I carried the ledger everywhere now, tucked into my apron, folded under the stale bread he thought I fetched just to keep busy. In the cellar behind the bakery, I traced every borrowed coin back to its source. Who he owed. How much interest he forgot to pay. Who would come knocking first when the final warning turned into a heavy boot on the porch. I learned to make my voice sweet when his friends came to drink. More tea, uncle? More sugar, sir? While they laughed, I listened. I learned which one would trade secrets for small favors, which one hated him just enough to slip me a name, an address, a hint of where the real owners sat counting overdue debts. One night, I stood in the cellar with my boy, my soft-eyed, flour-dusted conspirator. He held my hands over the ledger and said, "Tell me you're ready." I didn't say yes. I only turned the last page and signed my name where his used to be. Outside, the world slept in its summer heat, doors cracked open for breeze, blinds half drawn. Inside, I inked out the last lie he told himself, that I would always be grateful for crumbs. Winter's chill settled deep in the bones of the old house, but inside, a different kind of warmth spread. The kitchen was mine now, though cracked tiles and peeling wallpaper whispered stories of neglect. I saw possibility in every corner. I cooked simple meals from the scraps my uncle discarded, seasoning them with hope and quiet determination. The family gathered as usual one Sunday, voices loud and laughter sharper than knives. They glanced my way barely, but I caught their stares and held their gaze steady. No longer the girl who refilled glasses unseen, I sat at the table they once ignored. A place set with my own hands, my own plates, no crumbs, no leftovers. They whispered about me behind folded napkins and clinking silverware. But I smiled, soft and slow, tasting the victory in the silence. Not a word was spoken about the house, the debts, or the lease. Theirs was a feast of hollow boasts, mine was a banquet of quiet triumph. And as the fire flickered low, I traced the rim of my glass and promised myself, this table is just the beginning. Spring breathed new life through cracked windows, soft sunlight warming the worn floorboards. I sent the invitations quietly, no gilded cards, no grand announcements, just simple notes folded and slipped under doors, into mailboxes, carried by neighbors who knew what it meant to watch quietly and wait. The night of the gathering, the little house hummed with whispered excitement. Flickering candles lined the windowsills, their gentle glow casting soft shadows on faces I once feared would never see me as anything more than a ghost in the corner. They came not my family, but those I chose. Neighbors who saw the work in my hands, the strength in my silence. Friends who believed in the slow burning of dreams, the power of patience. We broke bread together, shared stories like treasures, and in that warm, crowded room, I saw a new family taking shape, one built on respect, on love that didn't need loud words to be heard. Outside, the world carried on unaware, but inside, the house was alive with quiet victory. The years folded softly, like the pages of a book I'd written with steady hands and quiet heart. The house no longer whispered of debt, but hummed with life, laughter spilling through open windows, footsteps weaving a new story into every creak of the floor. My uncle's voice became a distant echo, a shadow that shrank with every dawn. They called me daughter, wife, owner, names I wore like armor, forged not in battle cries, but in patient, unyielding silence. One evening, beneath the glow of the same string lights we hung years ago, I stood by the window where it all began. The corner seat was empty now, but the room was full, with friends, with love, with the quiet power of having claimed my place. I touched the warm glass and whispered to the night, "This is mine." Not because I took it, but because I earned it, one small victory at a time. The house, the street, the shop, all mine now. And in that calm light, I finally smiled for myself.